Hello and welcome back to my channel. So this is gonna be a rant video. I'm gonna rant a lot about people on the internet, the big baddies out there on YouTube, showing things and being unhappy about their own hardware. So specifically I'm gonna talk about 2K resolution in God of War and 1080 Ti. Now, I know that 1080 Ti is a 4 years old card. Well, 5 now to be fair, okay? It launched in 2017. It's 2022, so technically that does put it in a 5-year bracket. I do believe it's still, in my mind, a 4-year-old GPU. So what people do, they go in settings with their 2K monitors, which is very good, nice and dandy. They put it on 2K, they put it on Ultra, and they go like, oh, I'm getting low frames. When I look at the world, I'll get below 60, 53. Oh my god, and if I go in combat, I'm getting like 45. The world has ended. My PC is garbage. And then you look in the distance and then you see that it's above 60. Happy numbers, right? So, first and foremost, I must say, people apparently don't realize this one simple thing, and I do understand why, because they don't play around with settings. You know, there's a certain group of people out there that will defend their old hardware with tooth and nail, okay? I'm one of those people to a point, specifically when it comes to quality of life improvements when it comes to gaming. First of all, it's very, very rare that ultra setting gives you any extra eye candy than very high or high settings in games, first of all. Second of all, when it comes to console to PC ports, performance drop is expected. Of course, you can dish out thousands of pounds, euros, dollars, rupees, rubles, Canadian, Australian dollars, doesn't really matter, to get top tier cards, top tier CPU, and one day you will be in exactly the same spot. Your PC cannot handle something on Ultra within 60 frames if you are a frame hunter. If you're a person who always put everything on Ultra and you expect 60 plus, well, then prepare to open your wallet a lot. Literally. We can start with CPU upgrades, go for the RAM, go for the NVMe, go for the motherboards. Start with overclock, go for the GPU, and the list fucking goes on, right? So, how do we fix this below 60 issue? It's very simple. We kind of need to understand what makes the game tick. So let's look at the preset, it's Ultra. Let's go for the next preset, which is the custom one. And we can literally cherry pick what we think we need and what we can live without. Now we're gonna come back to this. Currently we are on Ultra set, well, technically custom, so yeah, let's just for the sake of comparison, right? So we're having 60 frames, right? That tower over there is blurry. Those guys with the oars in the boats are blurry. The beach is blurry. The water, literally can see, you can almost put a point where it cuts off the rendering. The reason why is because this game focuses on Kratos. It's a third person rip and tear title where everything that you see within vicinity of Kratos, literally up until that second sculpture there, is your battle arena. So the shining armor, the ground effects, the foliage, all the enemies. You will never ever find an enemy who's attacking you from that mountaintop or that tower top or anywhere near. Kratos is pretty self-contained game with the pretty self-contained levels. Okay, it's very simple. So, do you need 100 frames all the way right now? Let's be honest, you don't. So what can we do with this? You go back to the settings page. We go for the custom. Let's read through what we have. We have texture quality. So we set the mipmap quality of the stream textures. So we want textures. Textures does not take away processing power really. They take away memory because the texture needs to be preloaded and stored in the memory, so it needs to be accessed. If you have a GPU that can actually utilize this, your GPU will have the bandwidth. It will have the bandwidth. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Okay? It's gonna stream those textures in. As long as it have the buffer to store all this, to preload it without hiccups, which most likely will depend on your hard drive. You have an SSD, NVMe, or a regular hard drive. I would say if you're really strapped for cash, go for a hybrid drive. Hybrid drives are basically, tiny portion of it is a flash memory like an SSD and the rest is an actual physical hard drive. If you play the game, let's say 3 times in a row, the operating system will basically learn, okay, so we need to pre-cache these files in fast access memory, which is the SSD portion, and the rest can be taken when needed and if needed from the hard drive portion, which is slower, usually 7,200 RPMs, which is fine. If you can splash down and go for SSD, it's already a bit of an improvement. I'm not the person who will say that your boot times matter in the morning, but you know, if you need to wait 10 minutes for your PC to boot up, it might be a good idea to upgrade to an SSD. If you have an NVMe drive, great, as long as your motherboard and your CPU can utilize it in full bandwidth, because there's simply, rule of thumb, there's always a bottleneck in your system. It's just how it goes. We haven't we haven't breached the ice on that. Obviously the Ryzens are now coming out with the PC Express Gen 4s and whatnot. Fair enough, good, amazing, right? It's still, all of this works together. So model quality. So this is basically, as you can see, it says the quality of the model geometry. So models are assets in the world. First model you're gonna see is Kratos itself, Atreus, enemies. Secondary models will be anything around that actually have mass, or you can interact, or you can make damage to, or make anything goes boom, which basically means rocks and trees. Foliage and stuff like that is not exactly a model itself per se, but you know, you can't just yeet out chunks of grass and land, right? So it's not exactly a model, it's not a destructive environment. So do you need alter settings? I would say yes, because again, remember, you're going to be focusing on Kratos. It's going to be in the middle of your screen pretty much 100% of the time, maybe not during the cutscenes, okay? Anisotric filter. So the filtering quality. This is basically anti-analyzing in very large draws. It does very similar job to it. Keeping it on ultra or lower does not exactly help too much for the GPU, because GPU already has these frames, okay? It knows what you are currently looking at because it's already there. It's been pre-cached, pre-rendered, it's been processed, it goes through the GPU core or the CPU of the GPU. Whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. You already have a picture on the screen, okay? So if you want to have less jagged edges between the objects in a distance or close up, yeah, you can play with this, but honestly, I wouldn't say that this actually plays too much of a role. If I had to pick or guess, I would say this is basically about times 16, this is probably times 8, this is probably times 4, and this is probably times 2 or even off. Because that's how anisotropic filters works for most games. 16 or 8, very little difference on or impact on performance when it comes to it, so I wouldn't even touch it. Now when it comes to shadows, and this is what people don't understand, okay? So shadows go hand to hand with ambient occlusion and atmospherics. At least these are the names used in this game. Basically, shadows need to be drawn and they need to reflect the actual shadow of an object in position to a light source. So if you move around and the object is in your field of view and the light source is moving in correlation to you, it needs to draw the shadow. Now this is gonna have impact because it needs to calculate and it needs to project the shadow either sharp or soft, depends on the quality level of the shadow. Since we don't really have that slider as most games have, you kind of need to take your pick. I would go with the original for the simple reason I haven't seen a single person who will look at the game's shadows and go like, nah, it doesn't look shadowy enough, I'm gonna throw out my PC now. Okay? No, doesn't matter. I would say low would even be better. If you want this deep immersion, well, go for it. Original, I think, is absolutely fine. Reflections. So this is a very good topic in terms of reflections in God of War. How many reflections can we actually count on one hand? Do we have water reflections? Very minimalistic. Not exactly, it doesn't really reflect your boat or things around. Maybe I just haven't noticed. We do have reflections from the tiles. We do have reflections from polished surfaces. Not too much glass. And we don't have reflections from Kratos' armor. Also, the game does not have RTX. If it had RTX, we would have DLSS, and I don't see these options here. Unless the game magically knows I don't have an RTX card. Which is fair enough, but I don't see these options. Even Warzone has these options, and you know, Cyberpunk have these options. Doom Eternal have these options. So every game that supports DLSS or RTX have the option for on-off. I don't see it here. So do I want to give performance to a thing that I'm going to be seeing very rarely in a game? And honestly, let's be honest here again. Will you stop and look at the reflection for, I don't know, 50 hours? Are you going to be killing monsters? High original. My choice is original because I'm not going to appreciate reflections. I never understood this. You know, when the first trailer for Battlefield 5 dropped and they were literally showcasing the RTX reflections in a car mirror to bring this immersive battle, my first question was, who's gonna stop with a 2080 Ti in the middle of a conquest map and look at their own reflection in a car mirror? That was my first question, and obviously there's no answer because it is a nice thing to have, sure, but is it functional? Does it give you an advantage? It might give you a feel for, you know, the realistic environment, sure, but to be honest, better physics, destructive environment kind of gives a bit more immersion than just mirror reflections per se. Atmospherics. Now, this is entirely a personal preference, I would say. Some people want to have a lot of volumetric fog. Like a lot. So when they go, they have this mystical feeling that they're in some weird place. I don't see the point of this because honestly the fog is always there. It's literally somewhere lingering. It's not like you can transition from one place without the fog into some crypt, right? It's always there. You're in the forest, there's a fog. You're out of the forest, there's a fog. You're in a lake, there's a fog. There's fog everywhere. So it kind of takes away the feeling that, you know, I don't know what is there. Maybe coming out of Witch's Cave into the Lake of Nines. Yes, there's like the big reveal that the fog kind of clears and you see the bridge. Yeah, one time in a game. Wow, I mean, you see where I'm going with this? So for me, I don't see the point of this. High or original works the same, literally. Original might be a little plain, not gonna lie. So let's just leave it at high. Ambient occlusion. So this is exactly meat and bones of everything. So for NVIDIA users, you already know that you have multiple options to choose from. You have SSAO, you have HBO, and you have HBO Plus. What it means in this game, God knows. But if we go for, let's say, high and original, the preview doesn't really matter. It doesn't change. So I would say it doesn't matter, okay? So what is ambient occlusion? It's basically how the light source will interact with the environment and how it will draw the shadows. That's what I said, the shadows and ambient occlusion goes hand in hand. So this is how you can tweak it. Since I've put my shadows on original, I'm going to use ambient occlusion on original as well. Now let's go out and look at the frames. There we go. We're looking around and we are no longer sub 50, to be honest. Do we still have some reflections? We still see some skybox reflection on this glass, which is useless. We still have some puddle reflections here, which is absolutely useless, but now we have more foliage in the frame and we're not falling below 60. let's go look at the draw distance, because there was not a slider for it. Still looks pretty, well, bad actually. Volumetric fog is there, but we already have gained over 60 frames. We're at 75. Kratos still looks great. The axe still has reflections. The armor still has reflections. Model details are fine. Where's the boy? Someone give me back my boy so I can take a look at him. Okay, so let's go and take a look at this boy. Well, surprisingly enough, the boy looks like a boy. Apart from his legs being stuck in stairs, which, you know, teenage years, come on, who hasn't got their legs stuck in the stairs at one point or another? Let's be real. This is pretty realistic. And everything else is fine. And again, still 2K. Some settings tweaked, and this is not like, you know, this is the settings you should use. No, you can experiment. First of all, this is an open area, which I would kind of expect to have a bit more performance impact when it comes to it. There's some foliage here, so if you go for a lot of grass, a lot of enemies, you might need to tweak these settings even more. But when it comes to draw distance and setting shadows and stuff for something you will never actually even see clearly, you kind of need to accept the fact that, you know, the 1080 Ti might not be the card to max this particular game out. It might not be the TI's fault. It might be, you know, the game engine, the port's fault. I mean, you can blame whoever you want, but please don't be that person who just flat out refuses to change a setting, thinking that if he's not playing it on Ultra, he's not getting the full experience. Well, the effects are still there. We're still getting sparks and axe blows. I mean, what exactly is the problem here? I don't know, guys. I honestly, I have no idea. I guess that's all I have for you today. Just, you know, spread the word. If someone is so hell-bent on graphical settings, and then you have to upgrade. That's all there is, man. You have to upgrade. Yeet your 1080 Ti out the window. Go out, good luck hunting down a 3080 Ti, and don't forget to upgrade your CPU, board, RAM, SSD to NVMe and everything else, and get a water cooling and overclock everything to shit. Or just play it on PlayStation Pro. You know? That's pretty much it. Sorry about the rant, but some people just tick me off. Thanks for watching, and see you all next time.